A lot of us stir and strive in a spirit I call applied hope, which is not some airy theoretical hope. It's not glandular optimism, which is another kind of fatalism, where you treat the future as fate, not choice, and don't take responsibility for creating the world you want. Applied hope is a very deliberate choice of heart and head to do each day the things, make the choices that will create a world worth being hopeful about. Raymond Williams said to be truly radical is to make hope possible, not despair convincing. And then that great activist, St. Francis of Assisi, said, preach the gospel at all times. If necessary, use words.
Welcome to the Dandelion Effect podcast, a space for organic conversation about the magic of living a connected life. Just like the natural world around us, we are all linked through an intricate web, a never-ending ripple that spans across the globe. Here, we explore the ideas that our guests carry through the world, remember who and what inspired them along the way, and uncover the seeds that help them blossom into their unique version of this human experience. This podcast is a production of the Feathered Pipe Foundation, whose mission is to help people find their direction through access to programs and experiences that support healing, education, community, and empowerment. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Dandelion Effect podcast. I'm your host, Andy Van Treese, and I'm coming to you today from the Feathered Pipe Ranch in Helena, Montana, where I have been lucky enough to spend my summers for the last several years. The Feathered Pipe Ranch is a world-renowned retreat center that hosts week-long yoga and wellness workshops from June through September, and as of this recording, we are smack in the middle of the season. Every retreat so far has been full of amazing people from all parts of the country and even all over the world. Yesterday, I met a woman who traveled all the way from Brazil to come here. This year really feels like a true reunion of humanity. People are open, vulnerable, eager to learn, and really willing to lean into friendship and healing. At least that's my perspective from what I've experienced in speaking with guests this summer. A real presence that leaves me optimistic for our collective futures, especially after the last few years of hardship and challenge and confusion. There's a lot of beauty that has come out of that, and we're seeing that unfold in real time here at the ranch this summer. To celebrate mid-season, we are airing the Best of Season 2 episode, a taster to hear pieces of all 12 episodes from our second podcast season, and a little reminder for you to go back and visit the ones that you missed over the last 6 months. Based on the analytics, I'm seeing that many new people are still finding and listening to Season 2, which is incredible because most of the conversations really are timeless and they're worth checking out even while the podcast team takes the summer hiatus for us to really be here at the ranch with people. These conversations that you'll hear in today's episode explore a range of topics including generational healing, veterans' mental health, the law of attraction, food as a love language, sustainable building, ethical technology and mindfulness, energy medicine, adventure travel, and so much more. Please enjoy the different voices you hear and the stories that are told. And if you're moved by any particular clip, you can find contact information for the guests in their specific episode show notes. So without further ado, enjoy this episode, and we'll see you on the other side. Episode 1, Judith Hanson Lassiter. Internationally known yoga teacher, author, and the first teacher to host a retreat at the Feathered Pipe Ranch in 1975. Excerpt from Trusting the Body's Wisdom to Guide Us Home.
Thinking is a useful tool. I hope I can do it well. But what yoga talks about, what the quote unquote, if you will, problem is that we believe our thoughts. Mm-hmm. What yoga teaches is that we want not to identify, I am Judith, I am a yoga teacher, I live in San Francisco, I am a mother, I have 9 grandchildren, I live on such and such a street, I like this, I'm good at that, I'm not good at that. Thinking about instead of the experience of. So let's try this little experiment. So sit up well. So you're sitting in front of your sitting bones, not on your tailbone, then you'll be slouching, but sitting in front. But it's safe for you to do this now, hearing this. Sit in front of your sitting bones. Slightly drop your head. Go to the geographic center of your brain. Now release the root of your tongue. I'm guessing that you moved, especially when I said release the root of the tongue, you moved immediately into a space of silence where thought was minimal.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
Mm-hmm. Something big shifted when I moved my tongue.
Yeah. So that is consciousness, pure consciousness, which is behind thinking. And that's what being present means. Recognizing and remembering. So first, let me say something about the neurology of the tongue and the brain. The tongue and the brain are very connected neurologically. So the parts of our brain that are reading, speaking, thinking are very connected to the tongue. Now, there are a lot of people running around loose that's not true. Their tongue is not connected to their brain. I was one of them at many times. But have you ever seen, or maybe you were this kid, most children, when they learn to write, if you look at them, it's so cute. Their tongue is sticking out of their mouth and they're writing with their tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're making shapes of the letters with the tongue.
I have family members that like do this thing with their tongue when they're writing or when they're like really concentrated on something. It's not quite sticking out, but it's like out and they're like biting it or.
Yeah. So neurologically, thinking, speaking, and the tongue, they're very, very, very intimately connected neurologically. So I have found that just going to the center of my brain, geographic center of my brain, anatomical center, and then dropping down a level and releasing the root of my tongue, which I always find is tense. And then there's the lotus of the heart. And then there's the deep, rich belly, where if you tune into it, you can feel the heartbeat of life itself. Because you're not living in the universe is living through you. The life force is living through you.
Episode 2, Tom Ryan, one of our resident elders, world's best father, and caretaker of the Feather Pipe Ranch from 1975 to 2008. Excerpt from A Life Built on the Law of Attraction. As an elder to those of us who are trying to stay connected with the original mission and preserve the essence of it, and do that in a way that fits with the times, moving things online, doing things like this podcast, upgrading facilities to have to compare to this retreat industry that exists now, that didn't exist when you guys first started. How does it feel to now be in this position that you are in? What's that experience like?
Well, I think it has, in a sense, it has arrived, and it's just continuing to grow into what it is. I remember, I'll go back to my first summer here. Indy and I were on the boat, that old boat that's still at the ranch, out on the lake one afternoon. And Indy is telling me that, she says, I don't know how to pay you for being here. We don't have much money. I said, I have a nice place to live, we have food to eat and a lot of people to be with. I says, I'm in great shape. I said, I don't need that. I said, let's just see if we can put this place on the map. And I said, if we do, fine. And if we fall on our face in an attempt to do it, hopefully we can walk out with each of us a quarter in our pocket and say we had a great time. And so then I remember when she was on her deathbed, and I went and visited her, and I told her, I says, India, we did it. I said, it is on the map, and it was just voted as the #1 retreat center in the country. So you can go in peace. Mm-hmm. And she did. So that's a big reflection right there as to where we are from where we started.
Yeah.
I think there's a song about it, we've come a long ways. And we did, and it's nice to see the people who are here now working at the ranch and trying to keep it going and improve, continue as to what it was, and upgrading. And the energy that these people have, they are here because they want to be here. And that helps. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of people have a job that they're going to because they need some money. And I'm sure these people also need the money, but they're here because they want to be here. Mm-hmm. Everybody seems to mesh together nicely.
So, given that you've lived at a yoga center and conscious living center for a majority of your life, almost the last 50 years, there's so much along the way that I'm sure that you have picked up. I am curious of what you would say today is your spiritual practice or your sacred practices or the things that keep you connected and sane and, you know, just keep you thriving and engaged in life.
My biggest thing is being thankful. I mean, I go through my house when I'm here by myself and I look at different segments of this house and know how it came together, or look out the windows and see what's out there, and I just give thanks to the power that made all this possible, made me being here possible. I mean, I was raised as a Catholic until I had a foul experience with the Catholic Church and walked away from it. And coming to the ranch, there's a lot of spiritual awareness here. I mean, India brought Hinduism here. Never knew anything about Hinduism. Now I know a little bit about Hinduism, and I know of Sai Baba. I've been in his presence as close as I am to you right now. Mm-hmm. And Buddhism, those are probably my two closest touchstones to any spirituality at this point. Mm-hmm. I don't have any particular practice that I follow. I just live in this place. I feel I live in a cathedral. Mm-hmm. You know, the whole place, I mean, I look out the window and there's, you know, snow-capped mountains around me. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't see anybody else's house or wires or roads or anything. So it's what God or that energy or that force put here. That's what I get to enjoy every day. To look at that with thanks every day. Thank you for being here. Thank you for this house. Thank you for these people that I get to associate with. Everything. It's just a big thank you. Just live in thanks for what you have.
Episode 3, Claudia Cravat, Colombian chef, writer, educator, and ambassador for Hola Montana. Excerpt from We Are One at the Table. You know, one of the things that I ask people is who influenced you? And I know that Mama Esco was a big influence on you, and you also had an English teacher a little bit later in life that was a big influence.
Yes.
Two really powerful and wise women that seemed to give you wisdom, give you attention, give you love and care and in different ways and introduce you to things. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about those two women.
So Mama Esco, Maria Scorsia, who was the cocinera, the cook in the house, she's this black lady, you know, as old as history. I don't know, she looked ancient to me. And the color of her skin, I remember from looking at eggplants, we ate a lot of eggplants, was like eggplant. It was like shiny black with like a purplish tint in it. And she had white kinky hair, and it was always wild, and she was extremely skinny, and the white uniforms never fit her. They were too big. So she would take a red dust cloth, this red big dust cloth, she would wrap it around. So at 6 o'clock in the morning or something, you would see her sweeping the little tile area, smoking her cigarette, and she had this transistor radio that was as old as she was. And then she would use like Reynolds wrap because the antenna was broken, so she would create an antenna to create better reception.
And what type of music was she playing?
Oh, she was playing cumbia, and cumbia is Colombian Afro music, which is pretty much all drums, and then it has a flute. So it's a combination of music of culture. So the flute is the native, the indigenous. The drums are the African influence, and the pollera is the Spanish skirt, like the flamenco dancers. So it's a blend. You know, Mama Esco came to my life at a very important time for my formation, right? She came at a time where I was questioning a lot about my parents' separation more than before. And my aunt had 5 sons. So not that she didn't love me, but she was focusing on those 5 boys because some of them had a lot of issues going on.
Yeah, 5 boys.
5 boys,
you're
you
busy.
know. And then she was also involved in all these benefits, you know. She was always helping the poor people with some organizations, working in little hospitals in the pueblos. So Mama Esco, you know, I just tended to go to the kitchen because I like food, and I guess, you know, I was finding comfort in eating, right? I never saw it as an eating disorder or anything like that. I just like being there. I like the atmosphere there. I like how she allowed me to explore and how she told me stories. One of the things that she taught me was that to cook you must feel, and that you must use your senses. And that the rice speaks to me. The rice is telling me when I must throw the water in, because we saute our rice like you make pilaf. We don't put the water and then the rice. You take the caldero, which is that pot that I served you rice with, and we put the oil and a clove of garlic, and we let it get sizzling hot. Then we throw in the rice, and we stir it, and we let it cook, and then it gets to the point where it's going, water! So she's taught me, like, I could be somewhere in the house and I'm keeping an eye at what the food on the stove is telling me to do.
Yeah.
So she taught me that, and how to use the smell, right? When is the coconut really getting to that point where you need to lower it down because it's caramelizing and it smells sweeter than it did at the beginning. And then she talks about love. That's like the last sense that you got to put in, and good thoughts, and then you got to have music, and it's just got to be a wonderful experience. So that's how I cook. That's how I learn, and it made me happy, so I continued.
Episode 4, Jessica Bugbee, U.S. Army combat veteran, wellness director at Hudson Valley National Center for Veteran Reintegration, and co-founder of Tribe. Excerpt from The Way of the Female Warrior.
Just irony, but my very first mission out of the gate, there was a mass casualty. Someone handed me a baby, and the parent was also standing right there screaming. I just remember having that out-of-body experience, you know, and then I just took that deep breath and told myself, okay. And that's where everything just kind of clicked into place. And from that point on until for about 10, 12 years, I just worked pretty flawlessly. And I knew very well how to do that. I believe that I could operate in such a way that no one could see that I was living in that space of fight or flight. I had such a facade. I think that's why it made me so good around the men, because I had a poker face and I was very laser focused. Sometimes I didn't understand how some people could not get their act together or not have certain things, if they weren't on point and they didn't know their stuff. I couldn't understand it. And I was a hard ass to people at times. I could be quite judgmental about certain things. When I was, a sergeant and leading soldiers, my nickname was the Standard. And I didn't know that for quite some time. And someone had let the cat out of the bag, I guess. And I was like, okay, the Standard. But really it was not funny, It was
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's got to be a lot of pressure for someone to be. And I did that to even my romantic partners, and talking about living consciously and when you start to sit back and you look at the pressure you put on other people, the expectations you put on other people, especially when we're all struggling in this place, this war zone. I try not to live my life in regret. And, I do wish that I could go back and be a kinder, gentler, spiritual being during that time. But I suppose maybe somebody would have died. Maybe I would have died.
Episode 5, Rodney Yee, internationally recognized yoga teacher, author, and co-founder of Use It, Urban Zen Integrative Therapy. Excerpt from Honoring Ancestry and Exploring the Beginner's Mind.
But there is also, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say, and we should give, some bow and honor to him since he just passed away, was, when you look at a rose, you're also looking at the sun, and you're also looking at the cloud and the rain and the earth that produced that rose. That's all actually in the body of the rose in the present moment. So in some ways, all of my ancestry and all of my future children are present within me right now. And so for me to use the tools of yoga to help let that come to the surface, then at least it can be recognized. It doesn't need to be fixed. It's sort of like, this is who I am. And to see myself more clearly in any given moment allows there to be some incredible liberation. And everybody thinks, I have to get rid of it, or I have to surgically remove it, or, they think of liberation as being something that gets rid of things. Mm-hmm. But maybe the getting rid of actually takes place through a sense of receiving it and accepting it and being with. And so, for instance, I feel like asana is a little bit like baking a pot. When you throw a pot, it's not very strong, but then when you fire it, it becomes a strong vessel. And then when you glaze it and fire it again, it even becomes stronger. So to me, there's an alchemy that's taking place in asana and pranayama and meditation. That in some ways, let's just pretend asana is the first making of the pot, and pranayama is the first firing of the pot. And meditation is then the glazing of the pot, and samadhi is just the using of the pot. So it's like I am the pot and it's being utilized for service.
Episode 6, Bob Quinn, Montana-based scientist, farmer, author, and entrepreneur. Excerpt from The High Cost of Cheap Food.
So if people have trouble eating wheat, there's 4 things that you can do to really stack the deck in your favor. One is eat organic. So it's not just the breeding, it's also the residue of pesticides and herbicides that are on the grain. That, for some people, is the main problem, not for all, but for some. So if you eat organic, you can eliminate that. If you eat heirloom or ancient wheat, you can eliminate the change that was made in the breeding program. That's when it really kicked in, the whole idea of abundant sheep food after World War II. This country, after they saw what happened in Europe, had no interest in us ever going hungry. And so there's a big push to have cheap, abundant food.
How do you know which are the old grains? I mean, what are some of the names of them, or how do people find them?
You have to ask. So the ancient wheats are einkorn, emmer, sometimes called farro, spelt, but you have to make sure it's not modern spelt that's been crossed with modern grain, but it's an ancient heirloom type spelt, and you have to ask about that. And of course, our Kamut Khorasan wheat is in that group. And then any wheats that are from pre-World War II, so Turkey Red, or from Canada, the Red Fife. Some of those other ones are not so common, but you can find them. And a lot of people can tell in eating the grain if they have trouble or not, especially those that they go to Europe and they say, well, I can eat the bread in Europe and I can't eat it in America. Well, then that tells me, first of all, their wheat hasn't had the amount of breeding ours has, because their bread is different generally. They're not really trying to make air bread like we do. They do a lot of sourdough. Their loaves are much more compacted, and that's just their tradition. So they don't have that kind of problem. The third thing you can do is eat whole grain instead of just white flour. White flour products, you're throwing away a third of the nutrition. So there's things in there that can help with your digestion, like the fiber and additional protein and vitamins that go out to the pigs with the brand. I tell people the pigs are eating better than we are. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing I've already mentioned is looking for sourdough and says bread's made with fast rising yeast. And those fast rising operations have only time to digest the sugar and turn that into carbon dioxide, and they don't even get to working on the starch or the proteins or the gluten at all. They're just acting for less than an hour even. Sourdough that goes for 24 hours, or even you get to 48 or even up to 72 hours, 95% of all the gluten is gone with a 72-hour fermentation.
Oh, wow.
It's like pre-digestion. So when your body eats that bread, it's already half digested for you, you could say.
Yeah.
And people can tell the difference. So if you do all four of those things, you're about 85 to 95% assured that you're going to be able to eat wheat without any problem anymore. And this is non-celiac. Not celiac. Celiac is only 1% of the population, but for some of those people, it's life and death.
Episode 7, Linda Kinsey, member of the Aani Nation and Native Connections Director for Helena Indian Alliance. Excerpt from Healing Historical Trauma.
Fast forward to now, at our ceremonies, our spiritual ceremonies that we have 3 major ones sometimes 2, sometimes only 1 in the summertime. And it attracts so many natives from all over the place, especially our own people. And so we have that very profound spiritual understanding and gifts and practices. And a lot of it is centered around that feathered pipe. Mm-hmm. That feathered pipe has been with our people throughout all of those tragedies. The coming over here, the movement, the epidemics, the poverty, the loss of language, the loss of pretty much, traditions and spiritual practices. But that's been with us. And so I still have that strong sense that there's something to that.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain a bit what a pipe represents for some of the listeners that are non-native, that are maybe have not heard of what this is? I mean, it's a relic, but you just explained it as something that is one of the reasons that people have been able to carry on and to continue on. So is there anything, that you want to share or can share about what a pipe is, what it represents, and then anything about the feathered pipe itself?
It's part of what we would call a creation story. We have 2 creation stories, and this one is surrounding the feathered pipe and how it came to be with our people. In the sense of that particular relic or, the feathered pipe, it's really supernatural faith and history and understanding of supernatural events. That whole story came to us from a dream that a young boy had. It was through a dream and through instructions through what we would call grandfathers or guardian angels or, our ancestors who are no longer with us, mm-hmm. gave him instructions on that pipe, on how to use it, on what it meant, and, on how to pray with it and things. And so with what we would call pipes nowadays, if you want to talk about ceremonial pipes, I mean, there's pipes that probably look like Native American pipes for objects or for show, and people don't use them. But there's truly other pipes that are really regarded as very sacred to that keeper or to that family or to that tribe that are used. Mm-hmm. It's not really the pipe itself, the tangible, like the stem in the bowl is usually made from pipestone or some kind of hard rock, but it's the medicine that you put into the pipe to use for smoking or to sharing. A lot of times we hear about stories on peacekeeping, I guess in English would call it a peace pipe, that was used in the treaty days. The Indians would sit down and have pipe ceremony. That tobacco is what we would use as that herb in that pipe, along with a mixture of other medicines maybe they'd want to use, but it's what we would call our chief medicine. And it's really ironic is because, modern day tobacco is very toxic and very harmful. And, smoking is not recommended to your good health. But the tobacco leaf and plant itself is, for a lot of native plains tribes, is what we would refer to as our chief medicine. And it's a communicator when used and when prayed with and thought of with intention on that herb.
Episode 8, Amory Lovins. Physicist, co-founder of Rocky Mountain Institute, currently RMI, and author of 31 books. Excerpt from Taoism and the Art of Creating a Sustainable Future.
The reason I was able to reframe the energy problem was there was no place you could study it, and I didn't know that much about it, so I had nothing to unlearn. And therefore, I was able to practice, and I've cultivated ever since, what in Eastern tradition is called beginner's mind, original mind, child mind, where you let go of all assumptions and preconceptions and therefore can take a completely fresh view. And in those days, for example, the energy problem was thought to be, where do we get more energy, more of any kind from any source at any price? I started instead at the other end by asking, what do you want energy for? What are you trying to do with it? It's not, you don't really want lumps of coal, raw kilowatt hours, barrels of sticky black goo. You're actually trying to get hot showers and cold beer and comfort and mobility and baked bread and smelted aluminum and so on. For each of those so-called end uses, which had not been previously examined, how much energy of what kind or quality, at what scale, from what source will do the job in the cheapest way. So this was a revolutionary inversion of what problem we were trying to solve. It turned out to give far better foresight, and it's now very widely adopted. But when I followed that logic, of course, it led to a completely different sort of energy vision where you'd wring a lot more work out of the energy we had. That was the cheapest thing to do. And then increasingly get it from renewable sources that would be the right size and quality for the job and socially compatible and acceptable and accessible.
Episode 9, Vijay Supra. World traveler, purveyor of ancient textiles, beads, and jewelry, and older sister of Feather Pipe founder India Supra. Excerpt from The Magic of Living Without a Map. I'd love to hear your most memorable or jungle-ish trip.
Right.
Is there any that you've been writing about, or is there anything like, Mount Kailash seems to be a big one?
I might have sent you a copy of it. I kind of wrote it out a little bit. I think I was probably in my 50s then, and that, even though I was older, I was still young enough to go off on a cryptic message and find a Tajik who spoke broken English.
That's the one I was going to ask you about.
That's one of my all-time faves. I don't know why. I was in Peshawar, and I had finished up, my shipment and everything. And then, India and I had a really old friend there, Colonel Kushwaku Moosh. He was from the royal family of Chitral. And India met him in 68. I met him in 88. She gave me a cryptic message to find the colonel when I went to Peshawar for my first trip. And so then I used to stay with him, and, he knew everything about adventure. And so I was with him, and I always used to carry a map of Central Asia with me, really jungly one, because I always wanted to go travel in Central Asia. This is before it was opened up. But he said, no, go to Chitral. And he had heard there was a Tajik who spoke broken English, and have that Tajik take me to Tajikistan. So I went up there with that cryptic message in mind. on my cargo Jeep going up, there was just Jeep travel, cargo Jeeps that carry stuff. I met this guy named Dominique, and he was Italian, but he had a business in England where he took people out on horseback rides and stuff like that in those part of the world, Zanskar or anywhere like that. He was up there too, and we just made friends. He was going to meet his guy who was bringing the horses back from another camp. But anyway, as it turned out, Colonel told me to find the Subadar, his Subadar, that's the man that takes care of the lands, and tell him to find me the Tajik. But then when I found the Subadar, he said, do you have a note from the Colonel? And I didn't have one. So he said, oh, that Tajik's gone back to Tajikistan. But when I was in town for a few days by the fort, I was visiting Colonel's wife. He could tell that I knew some people. So I love this thing where, me and Dominique are cooking at night, and he squats by our fire, and he says, his name's Abdul, and he's in Chunch. So he knew then he could give me that information. And then I told Abdul, let's ride the horses up next day, do you mind? And we rode him up there, and we found a Tajik, but he said he didn't speak any broken English, and he didn't want to travel with me because he didn't know me, and the Taliban were giving trouble and all like that. So Dominique and I came back, and I was really dejected and really sad. A few days I said, maybe there's another Tajik who speaks broken English. Let's go back to that chai shop and see if we can find him. But then I met this Mr. Beg, who was Colonel's old driver. He was up there too, and he spoke pretty good English. And so he went off with Dominic, and I waited in the chai shop while they went off to find Abdul and bring him back. But it was the same Abdul. But now that Abdul said he would take me. So we were in this back room, and this is just so favorite because it was just like, there was big jerry cans of kerosene, there were hides, there was like a slate table, and I said, oh my God, I'm putting my first caravan together. What do we need? Because Mr. Beg said he'd go along with us. So I was trying to figure out how much to give Abdul. Mr. Beg had to go shopping for sugar and tea and flour. We didn't even have the horses yet. We'd have to carry packs. I went up to Mr. Beg's. That was a little farther up the road in a cargo Jeep. And then we had to leave at 2 a.m. to go way at the end of the road before the Wakan quarter starts. We packed my luggage up in plastic sheeting so it looked tribal, and lots of ropes around it. And I wore some men's clothes just in case. But he did find us some porters to carry our stuff at first. So we went out with them, and there was those horrible bridges I call D- where there was no place to hold on and nothing on the bottom. You're crossing these rivers, and it's a good thing you don't know these things when you start an adventure. You'd never go.
Episode 10, Dave Morin, entrepreneur, investor, philanthropist, and chairman of Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California. Excerpt from Seeking Balance in the Age of Technology.
I think one of the things people don't realize is that your brain has no chance. Facebook is a 10 million computer. There are 10 million computers and data centers around the world that run Google and run Facebook. I think Google is actually 100 million computers now. And your one brain has no chance against these mega computers that are like incredibly smart. The whole fundamental problem of the internet right now is that we haven't discovered a business model that is a humane business model. Internet's been around for 29 years, since I was a child, when Mosaic launched, and I was playing with Mosaic in my grandfather's room. And the dream has always been this utopia where everybody can publish and everybody can find a community. You can find the 1,000 people that are into what you're into. And that's like, I think the thing that I've always loved the most about the internet, because when I was a kid, in that room in Montana, I could find other ski racers. I could find people that were into the music that I like. I could find other kids with ADD. I didn't feel so alone. Those are the great things about the internet. But the problem is, up until this point, we haven't discovered a business model that's not advertising.
Yeah.
Because of advertising, when you have a 10 million person computer at the center of a billion people using a system, the system will always be smarter than any individual one person, because it can see, if you think of it, it's very simple. The computer knows what everyone is doing. There's an asymmetry. It's like the computer is just smarter than any one person. I think it comes back to the point that I was making earlier around be on offense, not defense. I always say this to entrepreneurs that I work with: design your life first and then let the company eat the rest of it. Building a new company or a new family, any of it, like being a parent, all available time will be taken. Design the balance into your actual schedule, right? If you're married, make sure you're doing date nights twice a week. If you're a parent, make sure you're taking time for yourself, probably every day, whatever your workout is. Make sure that you're prioritizing when you're going to eat. You know, there's just like all these things that are part of living a holistically healthy life that the internet will consume all of it if you don't design in the stuff that's healthy first. That applies to whether you're being a founder or entrepreneur or just, you know, trying to live a more healthy life.
Episode 11, Tim Slofer, high school math teacher, winner of the Lilly Creative Grant for Indiana teachers, and our longest visiting guest in 2021. Excerpt from A Teacher's Guide to Lifelong Learning.
I mean, all the groups, they're all so unique and interesting. And I kind of learned that as I was there, just like the flow of a week and how it goes with the guests. And, you know, there's like that feeling out period. And then there's the time to explore the ranch and maybe an activity or something like that where you go out and do something. And then by the end of the week, everybody's just in tears because they're going to miss everybody so much. And it's keep going through that flow over and over again with.
Yeah, you were probably on an emotional roller coaster, making all these new friends, and then they leave and you're still there, and then more friends, and then they leave and you're still there. That's how we feel as staff.
There were a lot of discussions that were like, you know, intense things, you know, dealing with trauma and things like that and how that presents in the body. And it was neat stuff to talk about and to learn about. And then I did the Iyengar yoga with Marla app. That was the next one. And I didn't have a lot of yoga experience, but that was very different than any experience I'd ever had with yoga. I really liked it, but it was so intense. And it was like 2 sessions a day, and each session was like multiple hours, you know, and you're just, I remember towards the end of the week, like going to that evening session, just thinking, I don't know if I can do it again, you know, but that's about the time they'd let you do like a restorative pose or something so you can kind of rest up. And I think that's the week that Heidi told me, you don't have to do it all. Like you can, it's okay. That's probably the other biggest thing that I've taken away was when Heidi brought that point home with me about just listening to your body. You don't have to push. And in fact, that was kind of a big thing about yoga. Like it's okay to, you know, to challenge yourself or whatever, but you don't have to push. Sort of my experience with athletics and the physical aspect of my life has always been about push harder, you know what I mean? And I think that's kind of been what probably has gotten me to the point where, you know, I do deal with some injuries and things like that, because it's always like, oh, you just got to push harder.
That's such a mainstream narrative too. Like anybody coming from an athletic background usually has been taught that mindset of like, no pain, no gain, push through it. It's such an interesting dynamic because your body is the vehicle with which you're doing the sport, but you're almost told to not listen to it. I mean, that's such great advice from Heidi, and that type of advice from yoga teachers for me in my experience with yoga is always really helpful too, because I think it even helps those of us who are people pleasers or like want to be the good student. You know, there's even part of it where it's like if the teacher's saying something, if a coach is telling you to do something, or, you know, somebody who is in some form of authority, if they're telling you to do something, I'm going to like try my best to do the things. And with yoga, that same thing that happened to you also happened to me, where I just started to actually be taught to listen to myself. And that has been a practice that has really helped me in a lot of other areas of life. Episode 12, Donna Eden, author, gifted energy healer, and international teacher of the Eden Method. Excerpt from Self-Healing with Energy Medicine.
I saw a few doctors and nobody could really help me, and neither could he. Nobody knew what they could do with multiple sclerosis. And I was getting worse and worse and had a hard time walking. And then I had a heart attack at 27.
Oh my gosh.
Because all my organs were breaking down. And first of all, my mother was never worried. She always said, heal yourself, for goodness sakes, just heal yourself. What are you thinking? You would go to somebody else, heal yourself. And really, my mother got herself completely well a second time. When I was 16, she got TB again. And this time, there was no chance she would ever walk out of that hospital again. And she decided, okay, I have to heal myself. And she did.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what I did. When I had the 5th specialist say to me, there's nothing that we can do for you. All your organs are breaking down so quickly. You've got kids. Find homes for them. Find a way here.
Didn't one of them give you like an estimate of 9 months to live?
Yes. And somebody else gave me maybe up to 2 years, but that was the most. But for whatever reason, I didn't feel frightened when that 5th doctor said that. I heard, Mama, heal yourself.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, okay, I'll go home and I'll heal myself. I did not have a brain to tell me what to do. I just started laying my hands on myself in different places and notice what happened then. What happened then? Every time I do something, what happened then? And I wanted to get my legs stronger so I could really get around the house easier and not have to be in a wheelchair. And that's what I did. I just started working on my legs. But what was interesting was that the multiple sclerosis didn't heal first. The first thing that happened was all my allergies went away, all of them. And I mean, it was amazing. I was eating bread and potatoes. I loved it so much. And string beans, for God's sake.
Yeah, everything probably tasted amazing.
It was so wonderful. And eating all that food, I kept losing weight. And then I realized, my metabolism had been turned off all those years.
Yeah.
Probably if my body tried to metabolize something that was poison, it would have killed me. I think there was some intelligence that I knew was inside of me. And then I had asthma really bad, and my asthma went away. And then my multiple sclerosis started going away. I had buzzing all over my body, all over my face, all over everywhere. You know how sometimes when your foot falls asleep or your hand falls everywhere. And sometimes I couldn't talk. The buzzing was too much, so I couldn't move my mouth. And that went away. I mean, I was getting more and more excited about everything. And then when I was well, I was obnoxious because I wanted to tell everybody so badly. And in the beginning, I didn't think I was teaching. I thought I'm just sharing with people what they could do for themselves.
That's a wrap. The best of season 2 mashup is complete. I don't know about you, but hearing all 12 episodes from this spring really reminded me what incredibly widespread community we have here at the Feather Pipe. This season was special because we not only talked to people associated with the ranch, but we branched out to guests who have personal and professional missions that align with ours. Guests like Chef Claudia, Dave Morin, and Bob Quinn, they're new friends of ours that came into our sphere as a direct result of the Dandelion effect happening in real life. As this community grows, our knowledge expands, and so do our options and ideas for how to contribute to the world in a positive and uplifting way. Thank you to everyone who came on the show, who courageously shared their truths with me, and for everyone who has been listening, sharing the episodes, telling friends about the podcast, and donating to the Feather Pipe Foundation to keep this project going. We love you, we appreciate you, and we truly couldn't do this without you. A special thank you to Matthew Marsalic and the Drum Brothers, whose music you hear at the beginning and end of this podcast, as well as Dr. Jean Shinoda-Bolin, who first turned us on to the phenomenon of the Dandelion effect and how ideas move through the world. This podcast is a production of the Feather Pipe Foundation, a 501c3 dedicated to healing, education, community, and empowerment. Please donate to this project by visiting featherpipe.com/gratitude and share it with your friends. Have an amazing rest of your summer, and we will see you again in the fall. Have a beautiful day.